Hello everyone, this is Rajiv and I welcome you back on Aavriti once again. And today I'm going to show you a super cool technique of doing fashion illustrations in Photoshop. The objective of today's demonstration is very simple. I have downloaded this reference image, and on top of that we are going to put garments and we will be doing it from scratch. I have also downloaded couple of textures. One I'm planning to put it on the top of this model which I'm going to create in Photoshop, and I have also downloaded a denim texture which we are going to convert into a pattern and then apply at the bottom of this illustration. So stay tuned. I hope you learn something good from this demonstration. So first thing first, let's fire up Photoshop and then start up with a new file. I'm going to select an A4 size sheet with a 300 resolution and make sure that the orientation is set to portrait and the color mode is RGB. Make sure that the color mode is set to RGB 8-bit and then say create. Alright, so the next thing is to import the reference image. So I'm just gonna drag this image inside Photoshop, and when I see this plus sign appearing, I'll leave my mouse button to import the image here. And I'm gonna say enter to accept it. Now this is just a reference. We are not going to touch this layer at all. So basically we'll be creating our garment on top of it. Okay. So I would just make a copy of this and then keep it aside, because while we will start building the garment I should be able to see the contour of the body. That's just a good thing to do. Okay, now after this I'm gonna select both of this layer. I was holding shift when I clicked on it, and then I'm going to lock both of them because accidentally I don't want to mess it up. Now on top of that I'm going to, let me expand the layers panel so that you can see, and I'm also going to quickly go to the panel options and then go for a medium size because I need more space in the layers panel visible here. I'm gonna make a few layers to start with. So I'm going to create a total of 4 layers. Now these 4 layers are the basic prerequisites. If I decide to have more details in my illustration, I can probably make more layers, which I'm going to introduce you to at the end of this demonstrations. But I'll keep it to because I want to keep it short and simple, and even the beginners should be able to grasp each and everything which I'm doing in this. So I'll just keep it to basics right now, but if somebody is interested, feel free to explore further. So I'm gonna create 4 layers on top of it and then rename them quickly. I'm gonna call it top because first we are going to create the top of this uh, model, and then I'm going to create a layer and name it shadow because in this particular layer I'm gonna put shadows. On top I'm gonna create a layer for highlights, and the topmost layer is gonna have details. Now as I advance in this demonstration, I'll let you know what I mean when I say details, highlights, shadows, and top. So basically, the top is gonna have the silhouette of the garment. So we will be creating the silhouette of the garment by using pen tool. Create a basic crew-neck t-shirt. So I'm gonna start with the neckline. So it's just about creating a 2D flat silhouette of the garment on the body, and later on we are going to give all the details in it. So we have the silhouette, we have the path. Now I'm gonna convert this path into a selection by right clicking and then choosing make selection, and make sure that the feather radius is set to 1 and anti-alias should be selected, and then say OK. So got your path converted into a selection. Now the next thing is to select a solid color, which I'm going to do uh, by double clicking here on the color picker, and I'm gonna select a color. Now do not worry much about the selection of color, we can change it at any given point of time. So I'm just gonna select this light teal color and then say alt backspace. Alt plus backspace is the shortcut for filling in foreground color. and then I'm gonna say Control D to deselect. So this is the t-shirt which we are going to create, but right now it looks flat, two-dimensional shape. Obviously this is not what we intend to do, and we are going to step by step add on more details to it. So on the top layer I have created the silhouette of the garment. On the shadows layer I'm gonna put the shadows. I'm just assuming that the light is coming from the top right corner here, so the opposite every contour, just imagine the, let's just drop the opacity a little bit of this top so that we can see the internal contouring of the body. Okay, so just imagine the 3D form of the body, and depending on that start putting shadows in the regions where it is supposed to receive, because we are assuming that the light is coming from the top right corner. Shadow regions are going to be exactly on the opposite side of the form. So make sure that the shadow layer is highlighted, and we are going to use brush for doing that. So let's click on the brush tool, activate it. Let's right click, make sure that the hardness is set to 0 because we would like to have a very soft brush here, and increase the size a little bit. We can also do the increment in size of the brush by interactively using the bracket keys on the keyboard, the big bracket keys right above the enter keys. So it's very handy. And the opacity is set to 63%, which I'll just drop down to somewhere around 40-45%. Okay, and understand this, because we are dealing with shadows here, we'll be requiring a darker version of this color. So I'm gonna go back to the color selector for the foreground color and then just drop it down a little, go find a darker color than this one, and then say okay. Now if I start painting, you will see that the color is also bleeding out of the silhouette, which obviously we do not want. We want the shadows to be restricted within the silhouette. So it's a very simple thing to achieve. You just have to make sure that the selection is active, which encompasses the entire silhouette, and that can be done by holding Control and then clicking on the layer thumbnail here of the top layer. So Control and then click on this one, and the selection is active. Now if I paint on the shadow layer with the darker color with a soft brush, you would see that the shadow is only being restricted within the selection. So this is what we wanted. So I can zoom in and then just paint on the regions where the shadow is gonna fall. Do not worry if it is not coming right, just roughly mark the regions where the shadow is gonna come. Okay, because we are assuming the light is coming from the top right corner, these regions are going to receive more of shadows. The underbust regions are going to receive more of shadows, and of course the armpit regions are going to also receive a little bit of shadow. Right now it looks very rough and kind of not making much sense, but we can refine it by switching to the eraser tool. So just hit E on the keyboard to activate the eraser tool, or you can click here and then select the eraser tool as well, and then reduce the size of it. Right click and then check out whether you are having the correct hardness of the brush. I'll go with the soft brush once again, and I can erase, like, light is coming from here, keep that in mind. So it's gonna hit this spot, and obviously it's not gonna receive any of the shadows. Okay, it's a Control Z, and just refine, fine tune the areas where you have accidentally overdone the shadows. Okay, 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 much in control. Okay, I can also play around with the opacity of the eraser, and I can go back and throw by hitting B, add more shadows, and then hit E and reduce the brush size by using the bracket keys, and keep on refining till the time it satisfies the visual perception I'm looking for. So I'm gonna switch to brush tool, reduce the size of it, add a little bit of shadow here on this region, and then go back to eraser, reduce the size of it, sprint along. Okay, so more or less, if I just switch off this layer for a while, you would see the difference we managed to generate. I'm just gonna boost the opacity back to 100, and then let's see. Right now this looks flat. The moment I switch on the shadow layer, we have at least some sort of uh, 3D feel coming out of it just because we have added shadows. We can, definitely spend more time doing it and then, fine tuning it. Uh, I'm just going to quickly move to the next step by adding a little more shadows and then refining it quickly. Oh, sorry. I need to use a brush. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna boost the opacity. Okay, this seems fine. So I have added the shadows. Now the next thing is to add highlights. For adding highlights, obviously, we are gonna select a color which is lighter than the midtones, the color which we have applied on the silhouette. So I'm not gonna, I'm just going to make sure that the hue is not shifting a lot here while I'm doing the change. I just need to go a little up to make sure that I have a brighter color selected, and on the highlights once again this time I'm gonna paint with the brush, and I'll just drop down the opacity a little more because I want to have more control over the color I'm applying. So if I want the intensity to be higher, I'll just apply it couple of more times on the same place. See, as I do so, you can see a clear distinction in the regions where the highlight is being received by the light. So basically highlights are the reason where light is directly hitting the surface of the object. And since it is coming from the top right corner, I'm just keeping that in mind and putting up highlights accordingly. So the entire image looks more bright the moment we have added highlights, and the 3D form becomes more prominent. Now the last thing I'm gonna do here is add details. But before I do so, I want you to understand something about blending mods. Though if you want to understand it in full detail, then I would suggest you to refer another tutorial of mine where I'm talking in detail about the blend mods. But right now I want you to learn about just a couple of blend mods, which is multiply and screen, and both are opposite of each other. So on the shadow layer, I'm gonna change the blend mod to multiply, which makes the shadow more intense, and basically it removes everything which is white in this layer from this, and I'm going to select highlights and then change the blend mode to screen, which is exactly opposite of multiply and also does exactly opposite of multiply. So it's gonna remove everything which is there on the highlight, which is black on the highlight layer. So we have intense highlights and intense shadows, and the composition looks a little more brighter. Okay, so on the details layer, I'm gonna use the blend mode multiply because most of the time we are going to address only to the shadow parts in the details, the sharp lines which appears because of the crease lines, and that can be accentuated by putting details here with pen tool. Now this uh, the now from here onwards, I want you to be extra careful and pay a little more attention, because I'm going to use pen tool for creating path, and then I'm gonna apply strokes on those paths in order to get the crease lines, and that would really bring it more close to the reality. Well, so first thing first, I want you to understand how this is going to work. So I'm gonna deselect it because I want you to understand here uh, how we can create a path by using pen tool. And then let's go to the brush and set the size of the brush. I'm gonna pick a different color for it, a darker color, and then just paint. And before I do so, I'm gonna create a layer on top, and this layer is a temporary layer. I just want you to understand what is going here. So, and let's boost up the opacity all the way to the 100, and then see, this is the kind of stroke I'm going if I'm manually trying to use the brush tool, and this is not what I want. I want precision, I want a better control, I want better control over my brush strokes. And for getting that, we can use a feature which allows us to stroke a path with the brush tool. So let's see how we can do it. We have already drawn the path. It doesn't matter on which layer you draw the path, because paths are essentially independent of layer unless you put some stroke on it. So I'm gonna do it on layer 1 right now. Pen tool should be active and a path should be selected in order to get this context menu, which has this option stroke path. So if you click on this, it will let you choose the tool by which you want to stroke on the path, and you also have the option of simulating the pressure, and then say okay. Now right now the simulate process pressure did not do anything. I'll just shift this path a little up, and I want you to understand something which is very important and really brings your illustrations to life. So I'm gonna again right click here, but before I do so, I'll go back to the brush, and this time I'll ensure that these three handles are selected. Right now none of them are active, so you just need to click on them in order to make them active. You just hover your cursor on top of it if you want to understand what these handles are. I really don't want to make this tutorial very long for you people. So for getting the simulated effect in your brush strokes, you just make sure that these three are on. Now I'm gonna switch to pen tool, right click on it, choose stroke path. Brush is already selected, make sure simulate pressure is on, and I'm gonna say okay. Now I'm gonna move the path up so that you can see the difference in the strokes. So sometimes we require a consistent uniform thickness stroke, and sometimes we need this kind of simulation. Right now we are also simulating, we are simulating three things: opacity, the thickness of the stroke, and the density of the color. Those three handles were controlling these three things. Okay, so this is the process which we are going to do. I'm gonna get rid of this layer by hitting delete on the keyboard, and then come back to the illustration. But before I move further with putting on details here, I am just going to regain back my selection by holding control and clicking on this top layer's thumbnail. The selection is active now. I'm going to make sure that the details layer is selected. I'm going to use the pen tool, and then let's just quickly select the brush, reduce the opacity a little bit, go somewhere around 50. Make sure these handles are selected. I'm just gonna paint over it to check whether the details of this color would be right or not. I believe details of this color is going to really bring it to life. So let's just start doing our work. So pen tool is selected, and I'm gonna put few key details here. You can modify the path as you draw it by holding control and then dragging these handles and anchor points. Okay, so I intend to stroke this path with simulation because I want the crease line to start thin, get thicker as it reaches this point, and then again blend it nicely here when it ends. So that's the intention here. Well, so the path is already in place. I'm gonna right click and then choose stroke path. Make sure brush is selected, simulator pressure should be on, and I'm gonna say okay. Then I'm going to get rid of this path by right clicking and then choosing delete path. Obviously it's looking a little intenser than we wanted it to be, so we can definitely switch back to eraser tool anytime by just holding E on the keyboard. And let's really drop down the opacity this time to somewhere around 10 to 10%, and just paint over it if you want it to blend with rest of the things. Okay, this is a very handy tool, so you can use the eraser tool. If I remove this detail, you would see how blank this looks. The moment I add on the details, it really brings out the illustration from the two-dimensional plane we are working on. So let's again switch back to the pen tool, and then few key details we are gonna add. Okay, again we can right click and stroke path, and then say okay. To add the detail, right click and delete path. Now as you progress uh, in adding details, you would see that this is a very repetitive process. So essentially we are just, varying the path, and rest of the things are almost same. So it becomes a little, distracting and sometimes frustrating also for the people who are not good at doing the same thing again and again, and most of the creative people are like that. So why not let, take advantage of one of the most robust features of Photoshop, which is known as actions. So basically it lets us record actions and then apply the same repetitive process again and again just by hitting one keystroke. So we are going to record an action. So again I'm going to say Control D to deselect it because I'll be doing it outside. And then the basic idea here is to make a path and then hit a key on the keyboard which strokes it as per our desired settings of brush, and then deletes the path as well, so that we can draw the next path and then continue adding details to it very fast. So we already have a path in place. The next thing is, after this whatever we do is going to be repeated again and again. So I'm just gonna make sure that this is being recorded, and I'll replay the record when I need it. So for bringing up the actions panel, you can hit F9 on the keyboard. If you're using a laptop, sometimes you have to combine the function key on the laptop and then hit F9, and sometimes you can also press Alt F9 or function Alt F9. Otherwise you can straight away go to the Windows panel and then look for the actions. Okay, so in the actions panel I'm gonna create a new set first by creating on this icon here, and then I'm going to call it illustrations, because these set of actions I'm going to utilize while creating my illustrations in Photoshop. So here is the new sheet, and I'm going to collapse the default actions. So under the illustrations I'm going to create a new action and then call it stroke with simulation, because I want the simulation to be active for this, and it goes into the set illustrations. And the function key I want to use for this is going to be F2. So when I hit F2, it's going to play the things which we are recording right now. The recording is on. So if I right click here and then choose stroke path, make sure that the brush is selected, simulate pressure is on, I'm gonna say okay. It strokes it with the correct current brush settings, and I'm gonna right click, choose delete path, and then I'm going to stop the option. Now this phase is very important. You got to stop the option in order to utilize it. You cannot just let it, keep running in the background. It doesn't even give you uh, any instruction to switch it off. So be careful here. Once you are done with your thing, you just have to make sure that you are switching this off. Now the action is recorded and it is available to you. Just by hitting F2 I can get that. So make the stroke the way you want, and you just have to hit F2. You can still vary the color, so I can go for a different color if I want. See, and I can also change the settings of the brush as per my choice. So if I want the opacity to be 100, I can have that here. Okay, all right. So I'm just gonna get rid of everything which we have done here right now by selecting it and hitting delete on the keyboard. Say Control D. So we have managed to create an action with the simulated pressure. We are going to create another action without the simulation of the pressure. So the path is drawn. You know the drill already. You just have to start creating recording a new action, and this time I'm gonna call it stroke without simulation. I typed the simulation wrong. No, it was right. And the function key I'm going to assign is F3, and then I'm going to say record, right click, stroke path, and make sure that the brush, the simulation is off this time, and say okay. So you do not have it simulated here. Right click, delete the path,